morning, everybody. This is T. Falcon Napier. Welcome to the Circle of Brilliance. Today, we continue our exploration of emotions and where they land on the change grid and how we might be able to use that to better support our clients and reaching whatever outcomes they really happen to be looking at. Last time around, we started looking at a bunch of different diagrams that were very cute and were very, okay, clever and whatever, but they were obviously never intended to be any kind of a map that has any sense of continuum to it, so that we can say, oh, we're moving from here to here to here to here. These things all lead one to another. Therefore, maybe we can plot it on the change grid. We were unable to find one last time around that even got close to that. Even this one, if you think about confident versus, pardon me, gotta stop moving my pointer that way. If we even looked at things like confident and disappointed, I would say we know we're confident plots on the change grid. We know we're anxious plots on the change grid. And you know what? Those are more outgrid for confident and upgrid for anxious. But that would mean that the opposite of outgrid would be disappointment. If confident is outgrid, then disappointment would be ingrid. And I can see that there's some despairing. I can see there's a sadness that might exist in grid, but I certainly know that the opposite of upgrid is not angry. There might be some frustration kind of down there. So I look at this, I just go like, interesting arrangement. Thank you for showing us some opposites, but I don't think angry and afraid are opposite of one another. Happy and sad are, but I certainly don't see that angry and afraid are opposites of one another. So whoever put this together, thank you very much, but no, not so much. So let me show you another one that I thought this was really interesting. It's small, but let me see if I can slide it in and hopefully you guys can see this. Lori Lankins Farley apparently wrote some sort of a book or something about, I guess it's a podcast, Little Spriggs podcast, about the 5 natural human emotions and what happens when your child is not allowed to express them. Now, I don't know the content of her podcast or how this connects exclusively to children. I just saw the headline, The 5 Natural Human Emotions. And when I see the 5, that makes me believe that there's not a 6th or a 7th or a whatever, 12th. These are it. And so I said, what are these 5? And I look over here and the 5 are apparently love, grief, fear, envy, and anger. Now, we can certainly plot where those emotions are on the change grid. So let me just bring up a grid for you guys. So there we are. There's a grid. Well, okay, fine. We'll have to fuss this around a little bit. But all right, we know that upgrid, even if you look at the cheat sheet, the most basic reference guide for the 5 levels of tension, we know that anger, grief, and fear all live up in what level of productive tension? Yeah, unmute now and share.
Stress.
Up there, they're upgrid, they're up in stress. And I know that love, where would you guys want to plot love? Now, maybe a good way to answer this one is to think about what are the prerequisites that a human would experience in order to receive love openly and to give love openly. So you'll notice we never said that love is one of the core emotions. We said anger, grief, fear, lust, apathy, pride, and shame. These are the core emotions as we looked at the most basic sorts of things. Love isn't even mentioned. That would mean that one of those others or a combination of those others, love, grief, or, anger, grief, fear, lust, apathy, pride, and shame, would be needed to be present in order for love to be truly experienced and truly given. So shall we go through that list and eliminate and see what we're left with?
Sure.
So can shame and love occupy the same space at the same time?
No.
No.
No,
How about anger?
No.
no.
No. Grief?
No.
There
Oh,
is that love about the loss of a loved one that may come up with grief, but I think it's got something else going on that we'll get to in just a second. So, grief, fear,
No.
no. Um, apathy,
no.
Not really.
no. Shame,
No.
no. Well, that leaves us with lust and pride. So, lust, I think a lot of people mistake for love. So,
Right.
you guys remember my little definition for lust that kind of took it out of the whole sexual arena and
Yeah.
made it a little bit broader? Or how
It's
about this? How would you guys define lust?
yeah. Now you defined it at one point, I think last week even very well. Where you stated it's wanting something that you know you can't have.
Right, wanting something and believing you aren't able to have it for whatever reasons. And so we tend to put lust at what level of productive tension? Do you remember?
Hmm.
The wanting of something. I definitely want it.
Yeah, up in
Not so sure I can have it.
power stress.
I
Power
was,
stress, yeah, the wanting of something. And so if you think about some of the other characteristics of power stress, this is where there's a sense of urgency around something. I know I need to do something. I know I got to do it right now. Are you going to help me or what? That even that acknowledgement that some sort of help is necessary creates the question mark about whether or not you can actually achieve the outcome. But you're at that threshold of activation, you're whatever. So it's just the wanting of something. So, and by the way, looking at our little girl over here, I would say that lust and envy are probably very close neighbors emotionally. So I want it, otherwise, why would I envy it in somebody else? So jealousy and all that also live in this particular area of the change grid. Well, that leaves pride. And so when we talk about pride, I always have to remind people, don't use the Bible's definition of pride as one of the seven deadly sins and all that sort of stuff. I mean, that's really arrogance. Pride is just a sense of self that says, I have value, and I see that I have value, and I'm happy to share that value and exchange that value with other people who are also people of value. And so I've got some confidence, I've got the self-esteem, I know I have a purpose and I'm working to live that purpose, etc. So pride doesn't have to be about puffing yourself up. If anything, pride is an emotion that brings you to a place of balance, to a place that just says, I know I am worthwhile. I know I exist. I believe I exist for a reason. And even if that reason isn't predetermined, I choose to live my life with a purpose. So that kind of a narrative is to me what goes along with pride. What would you guys like to add to that? What
Yeah,
else?
I think that love can't exist without self-love. And
Mhm.
I think pride is at the basis of that. So I would put love certainly in the power line, in the heart line
Yeah.
somewhere. And if not in the center, then certainly moving toward somehow mid further along to the right, out
Yep.
further out grid, perhaps.
Well, yeah, let's take a look at that. Again, we said that all emotions, okay, the act of adjective mapping is in many ways a game of horseshoes versus hand grenades. So if you think that at the intersection of all coordinate pairs, there's a ringer, if you remember from playing horseshoes, that's a spot that you said there and only there. That's the ringer, that's the goal. Some things have got very tight ranges of impact. And for other things, it's more like a hand grenade. It might hit at a particular spot, but its impact zone is really quite large. And depending on the power inside of that explosive, it could maybe even cover the whole change grid. Who knows? So when I think of love, I would like to think that while the epicenter of love is the center of the change grid, because it does have to emanate from a place of pride, a sense that you view yourself as being worthy, as Kathy just described it. There has to be this self-love. If you don't love yourself, what's the likelihood that you would even accept or receive the love that other people are trying to give you?
Yeah, that's right. It doesn't exist. It's not real. You
It's
might
not
call it.
real. You don't feel you're worthy, and so you're not accepting it, etc. And what do you think the likelihood is of someone who doesn't have self-love feeling as though they have love to give to somebody else? I just don't think that's love. I think if anything, that's lust. You know, they want something, but they don't have it to give. So can I give love if I don't have love? Can I give love if I'm not coming from a place of love?
That would be why I think the love would be in the center, because the way you just described lust is conditional, whereas
Mhm.
real love isn't, is unconditional.
Yeah, because it just is. It's its own presence. It's its own energy.
It's a state.
And yeah, in fact, I've often wondered when I'm doing my meditation or when I'm doing my yoga, what am I hoping to find at the center? What I think, I'll just share this. I'd be interested in hearing what you guys also might be experiencing, but I like to think that I'm able to detach myself enough from the whole world around me in every form I possibly can. Um, and at that moment, be truly present with myself and be happy in that moment, to be able to look at myself and say, you're good for you, everything is at peace, the world is fine, and you're a all those kinds of things. It's like that's a moment for me to basically, I don't want to say celebrate myself because that feels more energized than it is. It's more like a presence of total acceptance of me. um, so what would you guys add to that or
I
share?
would just say it's unconditional love. I mean, that's really, I think, what I certainly seek in meditation, and what I think as humans we all seek, and it's very hard to find in the real world, in the third dimension as we call it. But
Sure.
it's that sense of unconditional love, unconditional acceptance that I think you can only find near the center, at or near the center of the change grid.
Hmm. Hmm.
My thought. That's my thought on that.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with that. In South Africa, we have a term when we're greeting people that goes beyond the nominal "Hi, how are you?" We say "Sawubona." Sawubona is a term that literally is saying, "I value you. I greet your humanity."
Mhm, mhm.
Mm.
And
Mhm.
even from, do you guys
It's
remember
it's
in, go right ahead.
it sounds like you could replace love with the words like um, how do you call it? Admiration or valuation.
A
So
value,
that's in the same route.
absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep. In fact, I wonder if the reason why we value things, or we do the process of evaluation where we're bestowing value on something, is because in one way or another, one phrasing or another, we love it. So
Mhm.
so I think that's really coming together, love and value. In fact, I've talked to you guys about a book that was written many years ago, and now you probably have to find it in a rare book room somewhere or maybe up on Amazon, but it's called The Philosophy of Value. And the philosophy of value was written by a Japanese educator by the name of Sunya Saburo Makaguchi. So I think Guchi, Makiguchi. Um, his thoughts were considered to be so revolutionary at the time that he was imprisoned for the rest of his life for these beliefs. But he believed that what you really needed to do when you were educating children was to have the children recognize that they are of value, that as an individual they are bringing something of value, and that ultimately life is about understanding what value you have and sharing and exchanging that value with others for their values. And so it's all kind of, that's where this mutuality came from. And Makaguchi said that the prerequisite for happiness was that you had to feel that there was value in yourself, in your way of operating, etc. So it's a very interesting kind of a read. It's a very small book. Um, and it's written in some rather strange kind of, or it was translated in a very strange kind of way. But that being said, the philosophy of value, he believed that absolutely everything was all about that. And by the way, pride is one of the things that gets talked about. It was one of the very first books I was able to find that actually mentioned pride in a positive light. Because when you recognize you have value, your reward is you feel proud of who you are. You feel a sense of self, and that pride gives you the confidence to go out there and share that value with others. So it's
If I
all
can just comment on that, T, I
sure.
find that interesting. I have a colleague who's written 3 books on the difference between Eastern and Western education. And one of the things that he found is that in the Asian, Japanese, Chinese educational systems, that as children, unlike what we think about them, that as children are taught to share and to value themselves and to, you know, and to be loved in the classroom. And so it's interesting, when you say that, he was probably imprisoned because of the concept of pride, which is not something that's acceptable in a group, in a country that values group over the individual to the extent that Japan does.
Right,
And
right.
so it's group pride is acceptable, but individual pride is not. And so it might have been that that was the reason he was in prison, because Japanese children are loved in the classroom in a way that we don't think they are, in a way that we have a stereotype that they're not. But it's interesting to hear you talk about that. I'll have to read that book.
Yeah, well, and he's up on, I just opened up a website about him. By the way, I'll slide it into the screen just so you guys can see how his name is spelled. Sunya Saburo Makaguchi. Value creating education. Rather than provide knowledge itself, we must encourage the joy and excitement that arise from learning. So if you kind of go through what his whole background is, obviously they're talking very about him, but already in his 70s, Makaguchi was subjected to harsh interrogation and extreme hardship as the authorities sought to force him to recant his beliefs. And then it talks about some group he created. I don't know what that all means. Makaguchi died of malnutrition and old age in prison in November 1944. But I would not be at all surprised to find out that many of the things he was remembered for as being revolutionary in nature are now accepted as something that somehow or another, you know, correct. But I just think that if you can find a copy of The Philosophy of Value, you'll find it to be one of the most interesting reads.
Thanks so much for that, T.
Yeah.
Yep. So anywho, so going back to this idea about horseshoes and hand grenades, when I think about where is love's impact zone, I would say to you that certainly there is an element of that amiable energy that is loving. Maybe in fact, I'll just say this and you guys can, and I'm just throwing this out there. I've not given this any thought at all, but maybe the amiable energy's quest for love is by caring for others. By loving others, they learn to love themselves. That's a possibility. But I would then want to see if the same dynamic holds true there. The expressive person, as they seek to calm themselves, ends up realizing that they don't need to find all their fulfillment and acknowledgement and all that from the outside world. And can be more comfortable there. And maybe the person who is too far in grid, you know, when we apply this to religion, we say that religion offers counsel to all 4 extremes. The counsel that religion tends to offer to the outgrid danger zone is to develop humility. Because as this person who's too far outgrid, too aggressive, too dominant or whatever, learns how to turn around and look at all the people that have been left in their wake, or all the people who have supported them and enabled them to get where they are, that starts to move them further in grid. Their humanity starts to reappear, and there they arrive at love. And certainly the people that are too far down grid, who are so capable, so competent, so equipped, but aren't really doing anything, as they find their new vision, their new mission, their new purpose, they get re-engaged. They find that there's love in the act of giving from what they've or really, amassed over times in terms of understanding and insight and knowledge. So what do you guys think about it? I mean, I just wing that. So you tell me if you think that feels like perhaps the pursuit, the oracle of the self, if you will, that pursuit of moving to the center of the change grid is an exercise in finding love.
I totally I'm with you on that, T. I think that's exactly.
Absolutely.
All right, well, good. Yeah. All right. Well, so that would then mean that at least we're getting glimmers of increasing love anytime we move towards the center. So there might even be some, I don't think it's in the danger zones, but maybe we start to feel a hint of it when we're between the green line and the red line. And maybe inside of the green circle, we find a lot of love, because I can kind of see that the amiable driver may be a driver, but they're being driven to care about something. And similarly, the driven amiable, that amiable energy is now becoming its strongest, and they're choosing to do something with whatever that amiability and that driver energy is doing. So I can kind of feel those easily. And maybe the person who is down grid, who has now found the new purpose, the new, et cetera, maybe right here they start to love whatever the tasks are a bit more, and that moves them there. And maybe the person moving down grid is really more about loving themselves. Because I've always wondered, these people that are out there partying hardy every day and every night and want to be so socially involved and have got way too many friends and way too many social commitments, is this just an avoidance behavior? So sometimes you just go like, that's just how they are able to escape, because they're so uncomfortable just being alone, being by themselves. So,
And that's a public health issue in today's time. I've been
right.
looking at some of the research in that with all this technology out here. They say loneliness, and people can say, yeah, I have a gazillion friends on Facebook, but they're still lonely.
Yeah, because those aren't friends.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but yeah, I think you're absolutely right. People, particularly with social isolation being what it is with COVID, their usual way of dealing with it is not available to them readily. And so now are they imbuing social media with a lot more substance and value to them than it really has?
Yeah. And they
It
move
makes you
them
wonder.
further away from the center is the thing, because I always see love as, in all the countries that I lived in that were different than my own, I always see love as, I call it the return trip. So it's kind of like you're going back within, and whenever you tend to depend on the externalities for it, you move away from that center. And so most of the cultures that I live in, particularly the Asian cultures, as Kathy explained, it's always about going within.
Right. And so then I think that's really interesting, because if going in brings me to a place of love, then leaving the center sacrifices those feelings of love, or at least changes the scenarios that I'm exposing myself to, which would do that. So if we said that all other emotions somehow or another are connected to a, I don't want to say a loss of love or even a compromise of love, but yeah, I don't know what word to describe it, but I'm thinking the different situations end up awakening emotions that are so powerful, it pushes love out of the way, or suppresses it, or whatever the word might be.
The way I was taught was that it suppresses it. That's what my Sifu used to always tell me, because one of the things he used to tell me is that we're meant to go through a continual catharsis of character. And so when we move away from the center, he says that's where you start to experience a compromise in terms of the way that he explained. There's a difference between operating out of the expanse of who you are, which comes from love, and operating at the expense, at your expense.
Well, now say that again.
He said there's a difference between operating out of the expanse of who you are, because love have no boundaries, they have no borders, right? So it's big. And so like we talked about, if you value yourself, then you're more likely to understand that other people have value and you'll value them as well. So that's operating out of the expanse of who you are. However, the more you move away from that center, now you start to compromise that love. You'll suppress it, or you'll undervalue yourself, overvalue others. There's all kinds of scenarios where you're operating at the expense of who you are.
I love that. Wow.
That is so in line with spiritual teaching, that when love, you know, anything that moves away from love, it's more like there's love and then there's the absence of love. Whatever form it takes, you know, in whatever form it takes. So yeah, Brian, that was great.
And so building on what you've just said, Kathy, if we talk about that there is love and then there's the absence of love, on the change grid, that would then plot at the danger zones and at the powerless point. In fact, the powerless point itself would be the global opposite of love.
That's right.
Now, a lot of people have tried to, I think, write about or talk about what the opposite of love is. And the most frequently cited is hatred. If I don't love something, I hate it. If I don't want to embrace it, I want to push it away. So I've heard it also be described as contempt. Is a word that has been used. Someone even said that the opposite of love is apathy.
Yeah, I would argue with you that the opposite of love is fear, and fear is at the base of all of those other things.
Interesting.
Yeah, because hate is a strong word. That literally means you want to put something to rest. I might be disappointed or experience some kinds of contempt, but I don't know if I necessarily hate. You know, I would see hate as the polar opposite of it.
Right, because to me, hatred also involves an element of
Excuse me?
anger. Yes, go right ahead, Joseph. Yeah.
It seems to me that there is some kind of continuum along the vertical line with love. So if you're in the center, then you have real love. But if you move up, something seems to lack, and then you have lust, and you want to chase it. So you go further up, it turns into anger because you can't have it.
That's
right.
good.
It's been taken from you. Yeah.
If you go down, if you go down, then maybe you start to focus on some subject matter like analytical ideas. I can't really explain it how the
no, you're right. I agree.
Downwards sequence is. Maybe you can help.
No, you're right, because as people move further and further down grid, they retreat into their minds.
Yes, head versus heart.
Head versus heart. Yeah. Yep. So this is all very head. Head. We used to have head, heart, soul, gut, and head, heart, soul, gut. And there was a fifth one.
Yes, Edie, everything I've ever had is pretty much apathy is the opposite. But I love not Freud. Carl Jung says, you know, where there is love, there is no will for power. And so that, and a lot of people like Jung.
The out-grid side, power moving way out-grid.
Yeah, certainly. We've always talked about that the change grid is about control more than it is about change, right? I mean, this tells us the capacity for change, the likelihood of change, all that sort of stuff. But we know that people don't change for the heck of changing. They change because they want to enhance their sense of control. And usually, particularly in business settings, we talk about that maximum control is achieved by the people who are moving themselves more out grid without getting ridiculous. But this is where we're going to feel a genuine sense of control. And as it goes further down grid, there is an assumption of control. And even further down grid, we might be in a state of an illusion of control. And we could review all that if you guys really want. But I like this idea that, well, is the opposite about a loss of power, or the quest for power, where the person in the center feels no need for power. In fact, what was that book? Power versus strength? Strength versus
Force.
power?
Power versus force.
Power versus force.
By Hawkins. The name is Dave.
Yep. And wasn't that about doing muscle testing?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So anyway, so let's just explore one of those for a second. What I originally wanted to go to is that because everybody is on this quest for love, if the center of the change grid is where it truly exists, then at the four extremes, is it possible for the person to still say, I love X, I love myself? And why is that not the kind of love we're talking about, the center of the change grid? So just to get it started, I think Edie was the one who mentioned that outgrid, it's about power. Was that, I don't know. So I think that the person who's that far outgrid loves power. For sure. That's what they're on, fame and fortune. They want to have that fame that comes from accomplishing things, being viewed as having accomplishing things. And some of that might be a very positive, picture, and some of it can be over the top. And now they're megalomaniacs and all that sort of stuff. But I think they're in love with power. I also think that they're in love with themselves, but it's a narcissistic kind of a love. Goes on. So does that resonate with you guys? Want to add anything to that?
I mean, I think that being in love, or when we talk culturally about in love, it's very different than the state of love that we're talking about.
Yes, absolutely.
So you can, we use the term love all the time. We could say, oh, I'm in love with pizza. I'm in love.
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
I'm in love with something, but it is more of the lust kind of love.
Exactly. That's where I'm squiggling around.
We use that term culturally and say, I'm in love.
Right. Where true connected love ultimately, I think, is the two people involved. And maybe if it's a family, the whole family is moving as a unit to the center. So even though they're all individuals, at least when they're together in their own little love bubble, that's kind of trying to create that individual experience at a larger population level in the center. Yeah, and certainly wasn't that what communes were all about, or what was it, years ago, or was going to go, I'm going to live in a world of peace and harmony and joy. And so it was trying to create something that was in the middle of the change grid. Yeah, and I think, just to finish it off, I think the people that are very far upward would say they're in love with excitement. They love having a good time. They love blah, blah, blah. And the in-grid people might say, I love taking care of others. I love blah, blah. And the down-grid people love whatever their hobby are, love whatever that mastery is that they've achieved might really be. But see, seems to be love dependent on other situations, on things outside of the self.
Right. That's what I call being a conditionist. So as long as the condition sustains, then you have that sense of love, and you can literally train yourself in that way of thinking. But then it's kind of like the athlete who runs the race, the gun goes off and they cross the finish line, and then the gun goes off again. And so it's off to the next thing. And so there's never any base to settle on. And that becomes a difficult life. I know that for a fact for myself.
Yeah, the whole conditionality. And maybe that's it. You said unconditional is in the center. Conditional starts to arise as we move away from that center.
Yeah, and that's the difference. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. And there's unconditional love, which is totally is. It's a state. It is. And then unconditional love is reflected in all these various manifestations around the change grid.
And so,
until you get to the danger zones where there is no love at all.
oh, interesting. So kind of an illusion for love or a substitute for love.
Delusion.
Yeah, because somewhere in
Can I ask
between that,
something?
oh yes, but go right ahead, always.
Sorry, how would you place obsession then in this case?
Well, obsession
To
is,
be
I
obsessed
think,
with something.
yeah, I think that that's a form of lust. It's that you are on a quest to have something that you do not have, and for whatever reasons, you believe it's the only thing that is worth having. So, and as I apply that to actual relationships people might be having, this is the person who becomes a stalker.
Yes.
You know, who's really obsessed with that individual. And so there's a lot of upgrade emotions coming in there as well. So yeah, that's definitely an upgrade thing. And again, when we start talking about situations like that, I go, now are we within or outside of the scope of the kinds of situations we would work in? Obviously, those of you who are licensed therapists and all that, you can deal with those situations. Those of us that are inside of the realm of coaches might go like, this one's too far gone for me. So I'll give it the old college try, but a referral might be forthcoming.
But for us, for those of us who are not certified, or we might be certifiable, but we're not certified.
Yeah, right.
Is that we need to see it. We need to.
Yes. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's why I've always just said, look, when you encounter any human being who is in a danger zone, they are not the only person in the danger zone. You are in there with them. Unless you can find a way to move yourself to the center, move yourself to part, you've got to detach. Otherwise, you could end up becoming a victim of whatever that outgrid behavior, or see, I said outgrid, that danger zone behavior may be. You might also get sucked into it. So
and it's easy to do that. I remember in medical school and rotations going through psychiatry and why I hated it, because just sitting there talking to some of the people, and some of them have real issues, like real neurological issues that they need to be medicated for. But those that are going this tangent about these narratives, I say, I used to leave like feeling so depleted.
Yep.
And all they were doing was talking about their story. So I say, I can't do this. I just can't. It's too much mental and emotional weight for me to recover from. If you have to develop a recovery strategy when you're interacting with someone in a relationship, then there's probably an issue there.
Yeah, exactly. But how many of us, we do experience that for whatever reason that's going on within ourselves on different days at different times. We have different capacities to even hear about other people's ick. And sometimes you go like, all right, I got the energy, let's hear it. And other times you just kind of go like, sorry, it's all full, drain for the day, go away now. So yeah, I completely resonate with what you're saying there. So now there's what do we have? We got about 10 more minutes. I didn't know we'd spend the whole time talking about love, but I'm glad we did. So I love this idea that as we move away from the change grid, love is, as we are describing it for the center, maybe we need to come up with a modifier for that type of love. Yeah, I don't want to say true love, but anyway.
Unconditional love. The
Unconditional, right. Unconditional love. We start to move away. That starts to become compromised in one way or another. So whether the love itself modifies or whether things start to drag us away from that sense of self, because sometimes I don't think that as people move away from the center of the change grid, they are no longer someone who has that essential element of the center always within them. I think it's all it's always there. I think they get distracted And a long period of being distracted makes getting back to center more difficult because it's now less familiar.
Yes, different habit. You become a habit.
Right. Well, I think there are people who live up grid and live out grid and live down grid and live in grid, but they still have an opportunity to get to the center. It's still that part of their essence is always there because it's their essence. It's essential to what the human experience is all about. So, but getting back to it is where the challenge may be. Again, now we're talking about the oracle of the self kind of pursuit. Okay. While we may very well return to this kind of idea about love, there was one diagram I stumbled across that I thought would have some value in exploring. I'm going to slide it into place now. I tried to find a larger one. I believe this comes from one of the many programs now available on emotional intelligence. But this was the first one I found that offered any sort of continuum. And so they have these 8 different emotions: joy, trust, fear, surprise, sadness, disgust, anger, and anticipation. Okay. Again, I don't know that that feels complete to me, but all right then. They then go in between and say the blend of joy and trust is what love is. So everybody stop for a second. The blend of joy and trust.
That's pretty close.
That's pretty close, but that seems to involve another person.
Yeah, it seems conditional to me. I like the idea of trust there because trust is credibility and believability. So there's like a trifactor with trust.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I'm not sure about the joy part.
See, joy. Go ahead.
I was going to say, if you take the notion of another person away and just think about joy and trust in the universe, joy of being alive, the joy of being oneself, the joy of being connected, to the universe versus the joy of being with another person, or the joy, do you know what I'm saying? I mean,
absolutely. In fact,
close to love.
If we look at the other 2 labels they've given us inside of that little petal of their flower, joy at a reduced energy is experienced as serenity. I definitely agree with serenity. Where at the extremely high level of joy is ecstasy. Ecstasy sounds much more upgrid. Even joy sounds more upgrid than my frame I put around the exec center of the change grid. But serenity is the exec center of the change grid. And I've got no idea what this little tip of the petal is. But nevertheless, I don't know why they've chosen not to label it. But whatever reasons, I definitely agree that serenity is something that's happening there. Now, as I move around, trust plus fear equals submission. Oh, by the way, going back to trust, its higher expression or more intense expression is admiration. And the lower one is acceptance. Yeah, don't know. But trust and fear equals submission. I trust you, but I'm afraid of you. Therefore, I defer.
Yeah, that would be the acceptance.
I'm frightened by a situation, but I trust this individual, so I will be willing to follow their guidance. Okay, I can kind of create scenarios where that would hold true. And now again, if these 2 put together equal something, then these 2 put together should equal something. So serenity and acceptance, that feels a little bit more in grid or more mid grid. Acceptance and apprehension. So again, if I'm submissive, I'm kind of on the one hand, because of trust, I'm accepting what you're telling me to do. But because I still have that level of fear present, there's still some apprehension about what's going on. So that's what I'm saying. I believe that these words in this middle shade of whatever color it is kind of like a softened expression of whatever the one in the middle is, and whatever's in the center of this little pie shape. Trivial Pursuit kind of pie wedge thing there. I think that's the extreme. Now, if we go around a little bit further, fear and surprise put together is awe. Now, awe can be both a beautiful thing and a terrifying thing. Yeah. So I get apprehension versus distraction. So surprise is amazement or distraction. Terror plus amazement. Fear plus surprise creates awe. Okay. We're just going to let that be. We'll pick up on this and talk about this in greater detail on Tuesday. I just wanted to plant some seeds. And by the way, you know, I do upload these things pretty much the same day that we go through them, so it'll be up there. But I think if you guys just did a search for, this is called wheelofemotion.jpg, and I got this directly from a Google search. So truly, if you just go to Google and type in Wheel of Emotions and then click on the images tab in Google, you'll see this. It'll be one of the very first ones that you see. Hopefully you can find one that's larger than this, but okay. So surprise and sadness gives me disapproval. So sadness at a reduced energy is pensiveness, and at a heightened level of energy is grief. Okay. Sadness and disgust blended together give me remorse. And remorse is, by the way, the closest word to shame I found on their little chart here. Loathing and grief. Now, get over here, disgust plus anger equals contempt. That feels right. Okay. Rage and loathing. Anger and anticipation equals aggressiveness. And anticipation and joy lead to optimism. So what I want to say about this is kind of like my little closing thoughts for all y'all to ponder upon between now and Tuesday is this is the first one that I've found that give me any sense of continuum, any sense of arrangement of emotions in a way that one would lead to another, and they would go through a blended experience as we work our way around and around and around this. So I can say to you, this feels like it's a step in the direction of possible overlay. But at the same time, I would say to you that the exact center of the change grid would not be the center of this flower. It would be what?
It would be up at the top.
It would be the points of all of the petals. So if I said take acceptance and minimize that, so when I just say the lowest energetic form of acceptance is probably the center of the change grid, because I'm now no longer debating do I or do I not accept it. It's simply I acknowledge it as it is. When it comes to apprehension, well, what's lower than apprehension? And that's just about noticing something or acknowledging something. I'm not apprehensive about it, but I might acknowledge it, I might whatever. And so I think, and I'm not going to go all the way around because time is just about up, but I think that what this model is missing, at least in my assessment of it, purely from this one diagram, so we know this can't possibly be anything more than the tiniest fraction of the body of knowledge that is behind this, that I think that they've got the most danger zone things in the center, and they have the most mid-grid things at the tips of the petals. So, and then I have to go around and go like, well, where do each one of these live then? Because I go to terror. Terror is upgrid. Admiration is a little bit up and out. Ecstasy is upgrid. Vigilance is upgrid. Rage is upgrid. Loathing could be upgrid, could be downgrid. Grief is upgrid, could be downgrid. Amazement could be upgrid, could be downgrid. So I'm just going like, nope, that's not happening either. So Oh, so anyway, I would like to discuss this more, only because while I appreciate that there is this continuum, there is this arrangement that makes sense. Is it just using some other spot on the change grid as the epicenter? What is it missing? Where is the most intense? Is ecstasy the only? Yeah, I'm just saying. I don't know what's
See,
going on. Yeah, go ahead.
see,
Yes, go ahead, Joseph.
it feels to me that we have to flip the flower inside out. So the center of the change grid is like serenity, acceptance, apprehension,
Yep.
surprise,
Yep. Soften all those.
distraction, and the extremes are in the inside now.
Yes. Yes.
But I understand your confusion because all seems to be upgrade in the center. But
right, it
how
does. It also...
could we explain ecstasy as the flow state outgrid?
Ecstasy could
to
be
open
outgrid.
things up.
It could definitely be a little bit on the outgrid side of things. And when I'm talking about ecstatic, maybe if I said ecstatic might actually be a blend of the driver energy and the expressive energy. So we would need to rotate this. What would that be? 45 degrees instead of 90? So, you know, that's I think worth pursuing. But all the things where is boredom? Is boredom a form of grief? Where are the downgrid emotions? Where are the in-grid? So again, maybe I'll take this to the next level of research and I'll actually click, you know, whenever you find one of these images on Google, you can click and it'll take you to the source that Google harvested it from. And so I may very well do that. In fact, I did find one other that used that diagram. Let me slide this into play. But this came from a marketing organization called Martech, and they said basically if you want to market something successfully, then you need to look at these and which ones are passive and which ones are active and which ones are pleasant versus unpleasant. So they've rearranged some things in an interesting way, but the continuum now sacrifices, because while worth and admiration certainly go together, I admire what I think is worthy, kindness and anger are opposites. So dismay and embarrassment may go together, but disrepute and pride are opposites of one another. Disrepute is a form of shame. So I think this is a very interesting sort of thing. And they, by the way, said that because marketing needs to be driven by emotions to move people through their limbic system into their cortex, or take them away from their cortex and get them purely to be in that limbic response kind of state. These are, they consider to be the 32 emotions that were essential for people in the world of marketing to understand. Yeah, anyway, but this is right from them. So Martech, if you want to do a little search, MARTEC, you'll find a lot, and very interesting stuff. Make no mistake about it. I find all of these things to be examples of someone's own brilliance. And so I don't want to do anything other than look at it, see if I can figure it out just at the surface. And if it starts to feel right, then I think it's worth a deeper dive. But one last one I'll throw in here. But this one, zones of regulation.
Whoa.
So we have a low state of alertness, an ideal state of alertness, a heightened state of alertness, and an extremely heightened state of alertness. Well, I just felt my level of tension go from downgrid to upgrid. So downgrid is bored, tired, sad, depressed, shy. Then I get happy, thankful, proud, calm, content. That feels a little bit more mid-grid. Then I get excited, worried, embarrassed, confused. That's feeling upgrid. Then I get upset, angry, aggressive, mad, elated. Now I'm definitely upgrid. So I look at things like that and I go like, well, thank you, but there's nothing here for me to do a deeper dive into. Yeah. All right. Okay, so obviously you guys are enjoying this. No one's dropped off the call, so that's always a good sign. We will pick up where we left off on Tuesday. Again, I encourage you very heartily to go to Google, do a search for Wheel of Emotions, and see if you can find this diagram. And we'll go from there. I really do wish I could share a diagram, but I can't. Okay, thanks everybody. Take care. Bye for now.
Bye.
Bye.